into the last kosha we're going to be talking about, which is the ANANDAMAYA kosha, or the bliss body. So we've kind of, in a way, worked our way down. Physical, pranic, mano, like conscious thought, unconscious, or wisdom body, where we're getting in touch with the deeper reaches of our mind and sort of getting in touch with some greater wisdom. But now we're in the ANANDAMAYA kosha. So Ananda means bliss. So this is the part of ourselves that is pure bliss. For many people, you've never really thought about a part of ourselves that is pure bliss, but in the yoga tradition, we consider like sort of our fundamental nature bliss. So it's the part of the infinite, right, and nature and God, whatever word works for you, that is expressed within us individually. Sometimes it's referred to as the Atman, sometimes the soul, sometimes the smaller self. In yoga, it's the spiritual heart, and it exists beyond the mind. And another way to think about it would be it's our connection really to the universe. So the reason, we kind of have this as our metaphor is because, our heart is where we feel things in terms of relationship to others in the world around us. And at its deepest point, that is ananda, which is bliss. So when we love, we balance this kosha. And there's a great text called the Narada Bhakti Sutras, right? Bhakti is the sense of devotion, surrender, and worship. And there's a good translation by Prem Prakash, and it says, the nature of spiritual devotion is supreme love. The nature of spiritual devotion is supreme love. Spiritual devotion does not rise from desire. Its nature is a state of inner stillness. So if you've ever experienced romantic love, you know this. It's a time where your heart opens and you feel really open and sort of super balanced. It's like the bliss body is finally fully recognized, and you feel like, oh, this is it. And our relationship with the infinite, right, is now seen, in this other person. So it's almost like you're so in love, you're in love with that person as they express, the infinite or God or nature. So this is a very, it's a unique experience. I mean, maybe we all have it, if we're lucky, once in our life or twice in our life. But that experience kind of keys us in to Anandamaya kosha. Hafiz is the great Sufi poet, and he's really into this subject, and he's probably the best expresser of this state. Only that illuminated one who keeps seducing the formless into form had the charm to win my heart. Only a perfect one who is always laughing at the word too can make you know love. So this is the kosha that allows one really to have that deep sort of inner peace and that kind of supreme knowledge, right? No matter what's going on around us. So connection, right, to the Anandamaya kosha can really mitigate or lessen any kind of suffering. It's our birthright to have a relationship with the Anandamaya kosha. So this is not something that only special people get to have. It's our right as human beings because it is part of ourselves. And if you look at the koshic model, you could just look at it as 1/5 of yourself, right? So from that perspective, it's like, oh, of course I can have a relationship with 1/5 of myself. If it's taken away or we get kind of shielded from it, we get confused and we get stuck in much smaller thinking. And it's particularly troubling because your system remembers Anandamaya kosha. You were born that way. So the problem is that when you get disconnected from it, then, your system is crying and yelling at you to do something about it. So you experience suffering because something just isn't right. It's great to sort of be brimming with this, but really what we would want is a nice kind of steady kind of feeling, like a very balanced connection with the part of ourselves that's our heart. So the practices are devotional or bhakti in nature. So for most people, we need ritual, right? So prayer, lighting candles, meditating on images of the divine, asking for help, cultivating love in all ways, being with others in a loving way, all balance the Anandamaya kosha. So religions from all over the world have these practices, and it's kind of like a universal, most spiritual traditions acknowledge this universally. What makes yoga specific, I think, is that that love is in us, and it's our bliss, and it's permanent. So it's not something that kind of comes and goes, and we don't have to sort of beg for it, although asking for help connects us to it. So it's a little different. And if you've grown up in a religious tradition, especially if you grew up in like sort of Judeo-Christian stuff, you might see like a little difference there. It's I think all religions and spiritual practices are getting at the same thing. But I think the distinction would be is that, when we ask for help and sort of pray and move into ritual, like, please let me say this, we're asking for what is already there as opposed to asking for something new, even though it might seem new to our mind. So the imbalance, right, would be a lack of connection to others and a lack of connection to ourselves. And in the Yoga Sutras, if you're going for sort of radical balance that leads you to higher consciousness, 123, right, says the end of spiritual practice is only obtained by placing oneself in the Lord, is Svara Pranidhanam. Now, Svara Pranidhanam means surrender. So another way to say that is the only way you're going to get where you want to go is to completely surrender. And when you surrender, your heart opens. So surrendering is not something in the Western culture that's very popular. And not that I'm an expert on Eastern culture, but my experience has been, it's sort of like more woven in the fabric of Eastern culture. So yoga, which comes out of Hinduism, this is a pretty kind of normal idea that you would surrender. But I think for those of us, probably those of you listening to this, it might be a new idea or something you don't do regularly. And so ritualizing it, ritualizing it is important because the ritual allows us to relax into the surrender piece. So what I may be suggesting as we do our practice is that we make it a regular practice. Samadhi are those spiritual gifts and those states we can come in that can kind of change the course of our lives. And it's only when we are surrendered that we can really receive these gifts. So, sometimes even my hand, right, is like receiving, like it's coming in, but really it's the other way. It's like if you look at our kosha chart and you have that Anandamaya kosha in the center, it's more like receiving, like the light of Ananda is now shining through the Vijnanamaya kosha and informing that, and then into the Manomaya kosha and informing that, and to the pranic body informing that, and to the physical body and informing that. So when you're reaching bliss states or you're connected or balanced, right, you will feel the sun of Anandamaya kosha like shining through the rest of your bodies. So if you're going to have a goal, that's kind of the goal, and the way you get there is to surrender. Setting ourselves up is the really important part. You want to really set yourself up to do the Anandamaya kosha practice, so you have that feeling of there's nothing to do and nowhere to go. Like it's timed and you're in a room that's safe and you've got your ritual set up. And in the practice, I suggest setting yourself up where you can see either nature, because nature is our connection to the divine. That's an easy connection. Or if you have a loved one, that you have like just deep, pure love for, could be living or dead, or deities, statues, anything, if you're into Buddha, there's Buddha. If you're into Jesus, there's Jesus. If you're into Ganesha, you're into Ganesha. Whatever's going to remind you, that's the whole point of deities, is that it reminds you of this part of yourself. So you kind of set your room up or your space up. And it can be very simple. You can be looking at a plant, you can be looking out the window, you can have one little deity that you love or picture, and you place it in front of you and you do the practice. And basically in the practice that I'm offering this week, we're going to be asking for help. Please help me open my heart. Please help me see things through a wider lens. Please help me see love. May I feel love, may my heart be open. And then there's another piece, which is we take our deity or nature or a person we love into our heart. So we're doing that to enhance connection to that love. So we're physically like moving towards our heart. We're taking that deity into our heart, and we are connecting with that part of ourselves. And in this way, and then finally it ends with a bowing sequence. And the reason we bow, and bowing is really important, I think, is, it's that physical expression of surrender. And we do this over and over again. So we do the practice and then we ritualize ourselves, right, to doing this. You could get the idea and sort of make your own version, because what's really important is that it's personal to you, that you feel a connection to this practice. So if you have another practice, I know a lot of the people taking this have practices that really makes you feel that sense of surrender and connection, then this is where you would insert it to balance your Anandamaya kosha. Another practice that works pretty well for balancing the Anandamaya kosha would be Yoga Nidra, which is what we started with. So you move through the koshas, and in the end, you are sitting with your own bliss. So for some reason this, try Yoga Nidra again with a different sort of perspective, which is like, I'm moving through my koshas to my bliss body, and then I'm just going to sit in my bliss for a few moments, and think of it that way. And in yoga, there's a long tradition of different paths, and some people in yoga are jnana yogis, and they use their mind a lot, so philosophy plays a key role, and the other koshic practices are lessened. And then, there's other paths that are bhakti in nature, where you're just surrendering to the divine, and these kinds of practices might be more important, the other ones are less. Doesn't mean that you don't have to address them, and in my system, all of them are addressed consistently, but it's okay if you're feeling a draw to one more than the others. You can always emphasize that. So I would ask you to try to do this bhakti practice, this Anandamaya kosha practice daily, just for a week. Record your impressions of that. See if you feel more open and loving and whole. And we'll note that. So I hope you enjoy your ananda, your bliss. I hope you're able to sort of focus on bliss as you move through the week. And it's always great and a real pleasure to encounter other people who are experiencing their own bliss body, because you find that those connections are very strong. So maybe connect to this week as well. So thank you for listening. Om Shanti, Om Peace.